Hey everybody, welcome to Rumor Flies. I'm Ryan.
I'm Josh.
And I'm Greg.
And today we actually have a special guest with us. We're going to be doing a history episode. We had one idea, but then we said, well, we have such a good guest here that we could potentially take advantage of. Sorry, Kristaps. That we're just going to go ahead and switch the format. And today we are going to be doing Cold War myths. It's going to be really fun, and we have our resident, I don't know, Kristaps, did you call yourself a former USSR citizen?
I was born in the USSR, after all.
So former would work. Yeah, there you go. So, Kristaps, you want to tell us a little bit about yourselves? First off, Kristaps is a part of the Dark Myths Collective that we're in. He runs the Eastern Border. He is one of the Lesser Bonapartes now, and he just started up another podcast. And you want to tell us about literally all of them?
Oh, yeah. Well, in short, I'll start with the Lesser Bonapartes, because I knew you were going to make a nice Soviet joke on me, but in the Lesser Bonapartes, we're a comedy history show, much like you guys do your research thing with funniness. We are a comedy history show. So you are all from New Orleans, and you'll always mention that on the show. So you know I'm from Riga, Latvia, and Glenn, my co-host, and the guy who actually started all this thing, he's from Alabama right now. I think he lives I think he's from Alabama.
Oh, that's not too far away from us.
I don't know precisely, but yeah, we wanted to do a special greeting for you on the show, so we researched quite a lot of facts about New Orleans and stuff. So
No.
And then we kind of did it authentically with terrible audio quality, such as this show has, and with the worst possible accents that you all do. Blast full volume audio clip, please.
Hi, y'all New Orleans folks enjoying your snow cones or tripping on absinthe on Bourbon Street. Although I've heard that Baton Rouge offers an even more authentic Louisiana experience than you do.
He's poking the coconut.
All right, so quick correction on Glenn right there. We call him snowballs down here, motherfucker.
Yes, we know. We Googled every possible way how to piss off a New Orleans person for this one.
That's great.
Poking the coconut.
It's all right. It's really hard to make fun of Alabama culture since it doesn't exist. So, you know.
That's
No,
great.
man, I did the research. Glenn did the recording because he could do the accent better, but I hope listeners will be able to hear this.
Oh, it's going on there. They're going to hear it.
That's
and
awesome.
We'll take the shame. Anyway, so
That's the one thing. I just thought you needed the special greeting right there.
Oh, yeah.
Our show is kind of a bit more serious than that, but we do really quality research, as you can possibly hear, because on the scale from 1 to 10, I think we researched pretty well on what your faux pas are in New Orleans.
yeah, I mean,
New Orleans, or what are you not supposed to say?
just don't even try. Yeah, I mean, so you got the Lesser Bonapartes, and then I helped you edit a couple episodes of Eastern Border, so I know you do your research for the most part. It's awesome.
Eastern Border is a people's history of the Soviet Union and Eastern Europe in general, and it's, well, it can be funny at times because we used black humor, really gallows humor, to deal with a lot of terrible shit that happened here, and it has a lot of really terrible stuff. It's like people's accounting, stories from the people who actually lived there with newspaper stories and everything. It's the people's history of that stuff. So that's kind of my first show, with which I started, and I hope you all check out the Eastern Border because that's my kind of main thing. And Lesser Bonapartes too, of course. And my new show is PDRP, People's Democratic Republic of Podcast, which you should only listen to if you're a hardcore politics fan, because I'm a journalist. I'm about to get my PhD in political science, and that's where I go full Hunter S. Thompson on political events and different countries and their parliaments. It's only 2 episodes.
Just doing Gonzo-style journalism, huh?
Yep. Trying my best.
That's awesome.
I prefer the term punk rock journalism.
I guess that's an invention too there. But yeah, I'm doing a lot of things here, and yeah, I hope you listeners will check me out. And don't hate me, but yeah.
Here's your little sampler of Kristaps now. So anyway, so like we said, we're going to cover the Cold War since Kristaps has a little bit of know-how and a little bit more insider information than us since he's surrounded by people that were once part of the USSR. We figured he'd be the perfect guest to have on for this episode. So,
Translation, I am fully fluent in Russian.
Yeah, and he's technically our first guest in an actual season. We've had some supplementals, but we trust you, Kristaps. You're going to do great. So anyway, I guess we can go ahead and start with the different subjects. We're going to start, I guess, more on the political side or the everyday life side with things, and I think Greg's going to start off.
Sure. So basically, there's this famous story. I'm sure, Kristaps, I'm sure you're very familiar with it. Here, one second, it's Justin. Wait. Okay. There's a very famous story, and I remember I studied a lot of Russian and Eastern Europe in college, and this would come up constantly in class with different professors, where the specific stories, they usually use a nail factory as an example, but in general, it's that the Soviet Union, because of their 5-year plans and stuff like that, instead of it was a command economy, so you'd have from the top down these quotas set, and based on the product, it would be weight, size, units, whatever. But the thing is that it wasn't usually an amalgamation of them all, and it usually didn't address the needs of the consumer. So you'd have something where it's like, the classic example is, like I said, the nail factory. You have to produce, 10 million tons of nails this year. And there's a famous comic, it's going to be in the show notes, where it shows 2 like cranes holding this one gigantic nail. And one guy's going, oh, did we, I forgot the exact translation, but he's basically asking like, oh, did we, is this really gonna be effective? And the guy says, doesn't matter. We got ahead of, we finished ahead of the plan. So the idea was that as long as you meet the letter of the law, but not the spirit of the law, it doesn't really matter. Like, produce 1 million tons. Well, I produce 1 million ton nail. Like, so the question, the myth I was looking up was, one, is this nail factory true? And in general, was this trend true? Did a lot of factories do this? And one of the better sources I found was My Time with Soviet Economics by Paul Craig Roberts. And basically, one of the kind of big quote in it was, the Soviet manager's success indicator was a measure of gross output, such as weight, quantity, square feet, or surface area. Gross output indicators played havoc with assortments, sizes, quality, and so on. Nikita Khrushchev complained of chandeliers so heavy that, quote, they pull the ceilings down on our heads, end quote. So basically, and then he goes on to actually reference the cartoon I was saying earlier with the giant nail. So it's one of those things where there probably wasn't this specific nail factory that did that, but there was this rampant problem of they'd make all these different shapes and sizes and assortments of certain products that weren't necessarily useful, but on paper, they met the letter of the law, and it's kind of become this story. It's kind of become this indicator, and what's the word I'm looking for? Kind of just an example of the inefficiencies of the Soviet economy, where some of the pitfalls of a command economy during a time when there is this myth around the U.S., especially after Sputnik, that Russia could just hammer out things. If they decide to build something, they'll get it done. And it's this fast, top-down, efficient economy, but it was incredibly wasteful. And usually it was a great way of, they had a lot of materials and produce goods that weren't meeting the needs of people. And they could mask it by saying, oh, well, we met the 5-year plan, and then there's no penalty, and the head of the factories would still make their pay and get their budgets and all that. So you can kind of see where this goes. It's just kind of it's a story that's not specifically true, but an indicator of a real problem in the Soviet economy.
Oh yeah, that actually was a very real problem. And one of the most kind of interesting facts about this is that, you kind of got your jobs in Soviet Union, but one of the most prestigious jobs was a guy who basically carries around and transports boxes of alcohol. And this lays into inefficiency because if you put enough, from every, you have these box, there's 20 vodka bottles in the box. And if you put and Soviets had a plan for everything. So technically, it was like this. It was calculated that, if you drive 20 kilometers with 20 boxes of vodka in your car, moving that from factory to the store, then 3 or 5 bottles would just break.
Kristaps, I just sent you the comic. When you're done, if you could translate translate it directly, that'd be awesome. If you don't mind,
we'll put it in the show notes.
I will, of course. I'm just gonna finish this.
Yeah, I was gonna say when you're done.
Because the idea is like this. Because these people were buying up empty vodka bottles because those were all completely standard. And they were just driving very carefully as to not break anything. Then at the end of their trip, they would just steal vodka bottles and put the broken ones in. So that, that was a way of stealing. And as vodka was the local currency, that was cool.
And meet your weight requirements.
And then this was indicative. This happened everywhere. Inefficiency was terrible.
So, Greg,
The direct translation. Who needs such a nail? It's nothing. What's important is we just fooled our nail plan in one instant.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's just it.
Yeah, well, that's how most political comics go. They have a good message in the image, but then afterwards it's kind of bland in the actual dialogue. They really need to make political comics that are just images, and they don't have to put any words in it whatsoever. That's a clever one to me. But I like the picture. It actually is much more well drawn than you see in our general, newspapers.
Yeah, so Greg, it seems like a big way that would have been maybe to fix this issue would be instead of, having to make, a metric ton of nails a month, they would have said, we need you to make 200,000 nails. Like they would have given it an actual.
But then they did that with some, and you'd get tiny.
Right.
Like
so
crappy nails.
I was trying to play devil's advocate, but that's a perfect response. They were more concerned about figuring out ways to beat the system than they actually were about completing the work and doing the job.
The letter of the law didn't matter.
Exactly. And
sorry, the letter of the law was important, not the spirit.
Not the spirit, right?
That's
correct,
like the people that are accused of like.
No, not the Harish. Spirits were very, very important.
There's like the people that are concerned with like figuring out they put a lot of effort in figuring out how they cannot do their job but look like they are when they could have spent all the effort doing their job.
There's a specifiing term for this, halyava.
Really? We need that term over in America. We don't have that.
We do. It's called the American government.
We still don't.
Zing.
That's our first political joke.
Somebody had to do it.
We're going to be bashing both sides. I guess we didn't really explain the Cold War for anybody that is not quite aware of it or happens to have been born after it. So Cold War is pretty much after World War II. U.S. and Russia kind of split ways and thought that each of them were going to... This is a very shortened version. And thought that each of them was either going to invade or straight up nuke each other. So it was a standstill for a long time, and it was a dick-waving contest between either proxy wars or through a space race. And we'll get to the space race part later, but generally it was America and the Soviet Union. That's the main players being very spiteful against each other.
I'll get into that a little bit when I get to my topic. So I'll try to pick up where you left off there. Ryan.
Kristaps, would you have any other input on what the Cold War was to you or to anybody else?
Well, if you want to know for what Cold War really meant for us, it was like it's kind of explained in this Soviet joke, really, because an American engineer comes to the Soviet Union and discusses just asks the other engineer is like, hey, what's the life in the Soviet Union? I mean, how much money do you make? Then there's a 5-minute silence, and the answer is, well, you lynch black people.
Oh my god,
that's great.
You're just like a joke factory, Kristaps. It's amazing. Every time we've talked, it's been just jokes on jokes on jokes, and we love it. So, and that's why I think you're gonna be an awesome Lester Bonaparte for years to come. So.
No, this isn't even the best one. Like the best one, which I'll come up to. Like one of my big jokes that I actually found is that Armenian radio gets called and they are asked, "Is there life on Mars?" Armenian radio answers, "Well, it doesn't really matter. When we'll go there, there'll only be communism there."
What do you call it? Terraforming, but instead of plants, it's communism. I don't know. We'll have to figure out a word for that.
You know what? Nikita Khrushchev tried to do that. He created a bunch of ecological catastrophes for
I know he tried to plant corn, right? When he saw the cornfields in the U.S. and he's like, corn,
everywhere.
that'll solve everything. And they grew a quarter as tall and cost a bunch of other crops. His harebrained schemes.
Turns out you need heat for that.
He tried to make Kazakhstan steppes an arable land, basically creating a gigantic dust bowl eventually.
Why do you think the Khans existed, or any of those nomadic tribes? They couldn't plant shit, so they just took it from everybody else.
Well, actually, Russia got smart, and they're one of the largest producers in the world currently of wheat and grain.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Yeah, the problem is they were like that all the time. The other problem is they used all the wheat to send it to the United States for money because we didn't have liquid currency, so it's not like people ever got to see anything of that.
No, the problem was the filthy grain hoarding kulaks. How many times did we go over this? always the kulak's fault.
So Greg,
By
is
the way,
there...
the name kulak means a fist.
Oh, okay.
I actually didn't know that.
That makes complete sense, though,
Yeah.
when you think about it. Greg, is there anything else you want to add to your topic?
So,
No.
Kristaps, have you ever kulaked someone?
Oh, God.
Jesus.
Okay.
The short answer is no. Just one of those good
No.
things where you take
No,
urban
but I would
folklore.
plug you but I would plug you on my show at any point.
Oh, that's just too appropriate for us.
Damn it, I cannot live that down ever. Whatever.
But yeah, it's one of those stories that basically gives you a truth of a real problem, but the specific nail factory story is not a actual specific instance that happened. The comic just illustrates a real economic problem.
It was a blanket statement over things. It wasn't the actual giant nail. It was just, it was equivalent to where people were probably doing just as much damage, except over little bits and pieces.
But when you think about it, Russia has a tendency of making one oversized thing of everything. I mean, they have the Tsar bell, the Tsar cannon,
The Tsar bomb?
gun.
Yeah!
I do have one more little story we can move on because it's so appropriate to this. It's an old joke that I'm sure Kristaps knows. A train is going and it ends up stopping because of a problem on the rails, and you've got Lenin, Stalin, Brezhnev, and Gorbachev all in the same guy, right? So Lenin first off just says, "Oh, it's okay. We'll find the other countries responsible for stopping us, and then we'll punish them." Stalin executes half the crew and promotes someone to the front who's never run a steam engine. Brezhnev moves the guys on the rails from the back to the front, the guys on the front to the back, and hopes something happens. And Gorbachev closes all the curtains on the trains and has everyone start moving their arms and making train sounds.
You can't imagine how appropriate this is.
Oh, man. Jokes on jokes. One last
Anyway,
little,
we can move on.
one last little bit before we move to...
That's a proud Soviet tradition.
Oh, yeah. Well, one last little bit before we move on to Josh's subject. Yeah, and it kind of segues a tiny bit just because we're talking about bombs and shit. So the Tsar bomb, the Tsar bomba, actually was scaled down by half because they thought that the planes could not actually escape the amount of the size of the blast from that.
So the planes wouldn't get Tsar enough away from the blast?
That's a terrible pun. You were getting a penalty shot for that.
Worth
Everclear for you.
Worth it.
Jesus Christ.
Everclear and pickle juice. Yeah, the Tsar bomb. The Tsar bomba was not something to f with. Anyway, Josh, you ready?
So what I'm going to talk about today is something that I'm sure most Americans and I'm sure most Latvians and Russians and everybody all over there by you, Kristaps, have heard before. And I'm going to talk about John F. Kennedy and his famous speech, Ich bin ein Berliner, which just to kind of set all of this up, I kind of gave like a little rundown of the Cold War up like from Kennedy's perspective up until that point, so you could understand more exactly like the gravity of his statement and what he was trying to accomplish by saying it. And then we'll get into more of the silliness after it that it kind of got misconstrued into. So when Kennedy became president in 1961, one of the first crises that he had to deal with was with Khrushchev, the Soviet leader at the time, because after World War II, like Ryan mentioned a little bit about the Cold War, Hitler's Third Reich was divided between the East and West. So you had East and West Germany, and the East was much more democratic, and the East was more dramatic, and the West was more democratic. I mixed those two words up, and so Khrushchev wanted to wipe out all of the West because it was a threat to him and the rest of Soviet Russia, and so Kennedy feared that the root of the war between the U.S. and Russia would come from Berlin. He feared that Berlin would be the spark that would like ignite the fire and the Cold War would begin. So Khrushchev said that he was going to sign a treaty with East Germany and he was going to wipe out the West and all this, happy horse bullshit. And Kennedy was like, pretty much just gave him the proverbial middle finger and called him out on it. And he just said, you're not going to do that. I'm not going to allow that to happen. I'm going to send in a strong military force and, you're not going anywhere. So Khrushchev backed down. And then His response to that, though, after he backed down, was that on the morning of August 13th, 1961, the East German government, with the help of Khrushchev and the rest of Soviet Russia, was they were going to build the wall, the Berlin Wall. So that kind of sets up...
The wall's going to be beautiful. It's going to be a great wall.
Germany's going to pay for it.
Germany's going to pay for it. Oh, man.
That's great. So 2 years later, that was in 1961. 2 years later, Kennedy goes over there to Germany, and he wants to see the problem face to face. Now, while he was there, he wanted to give a speech, and he wanted to give it to the German people, except the draft that he got that he hated. He couldn't stand it. It just sounded so fake. It sounded so phony. He didn't like it. So he started reworking on it, and he talked to a couple translators and things like that. And right before he went up to give a speech, he decided that he wanted to give the German equivalent of "I'm a Berliner." And he got this idea actually from Rome. And there was a statement, I actually have it written down. The words were, where are they? This is not good radio.
It's all right. That's what editing's for. This isn't going to make it on there. You can say whatever you want to right now. Kristaps can curse all he wants to. All right, go.
So the words were "civis Romanus sum," which means I am a Roman citizen. And that held a lot of weight back then. And so he wanted to bring that equivalent to the German people. And that's where he came with "Ich bin ein Berliner." And he ended his speech with "all free men, wherever they may live, are citizens of Berlin, and therefore, as a free man, I take pride in the words Ich bin ein Berliner." So somewhere along the line, there became a rumor that Kennedy fucked up. There was a rumor that because of his syntax and the way he phrased the words, he actually told the German people, "I am a jelly donut." And there was, articles written by a lot of major news sources that said that, Kennedy said this and the German people were laughing at him and all this other stuff. But I was actually, Greg, you'll be happy to know, I found, and I have in the show notes, the original article of where this first propagated in American newspapers. It was in the New York Times.
Primary sources.
Yes, it was the primary source. It was a New York Post opinion piece. Basically, the guy's talking about in the article how there's a lot of presidents down the line that have either been misquoted or the press have printed the wrong thing. But in all of it, the first thing that he says is he talks about Kennedy saying, "I'm a jelly donut." So there's some irony there to what he's saying. The first instance of "I'm a jelly donut" actually comes from a 1983 spy novel. And the New York Post actually got the idea from that. And they claimed that it was a homage to that book. It was called Berlin Game was the name of the book.
Yeah, because everybody read that fucking book.
Exactly. So, I mean, there's some bullshit shenanigans that's going on there. And the other thing is that this might have come from is that in different parts of Germany, they refer to donuts as Berliners. So that's where "Ich bin ein Berliner" comes from, as Kennedy saying, "I am a jelly donut," but that's not the case.
We just referred to him as contributions to diabetes here.
Yes, exactly. So I guess my question to you and all that, Kristaps, is that particular speech with Kennedy, is that looked upon as like a big moment in Soviet Russian history as like somebody standing up against the government, or like how was that viewed at the time?
Or even did that make it over to Russia where it was
that's even
Kennedy saying, "I'm a jelly donut, oh my god, the American president is so stupid," type of deal?
For one, in Russian, that jelly donut is called ponchik.
Okay.
Which has nothing to do with Berliner.
You're like the Dora the Explorer of podcasts, just teaching us Russian as we go.
Oh, in Russian, it's Dasha the Explorer.
Oh, really?
Yeah. And secondly, nobody actually heard that speech, well, obviously, here since until Gorbachev came to power, at all.
Really?
There was some things, but no. None of the people that I have spoken to have mentioned that as some sort of turning point. It was turning point for the West, maybe, but not here.
It's so funny how it's isolated for each country. Like, there's some things that may have been a big deal for their country, and the other side had no idea about it, or did not even, grasp the relevance of it at that point.
No, this. I mean, come on. There's this joke that Russian and American are just arguing. Like the American says, we have freedom of speech. I can go to the street right in front of the White House and yell "Death to Reagan," and nobody will just do anything to me. And the Russian just sits and replies, "Just think about it. I can just go in Kremlin and yell really loudly "Death to Reagan," and nothing will come to me as well."
Kristaps, I think I'm asking the real important question here, which is, you bring up Dasha the Explorer, but why is Winnie Pooh the greatest cartoon ever?
Because come on, Russian version is clearly superior, man.
Man,
And you have to see Hedgehog in the Fog, man. That's the best one. That's like the trippy one.
for anybody that doesn't know, Greg actually did a little bit of study on Russian history when he was in college.
I'm putting Winnie Pooh in the show notes. It's the greatest.
He also likes a little bit of Russian film, and him and Kristaps have gone off and off and off and on about it for a while. So they're going to have these cool little inside jokes, and me and Josh just going to sit here and keep drinking.
Well,
by the way, Josh might have...
Eisenstein is like the greatest movie director of all time, obviously.
Yeah.
Duh.
Well, Josh might have food poisoning, so we'll just be dealing with that while y'all are talking about movies.
yeah, we'll see about that. Well, it just kind of back to my point, Kristaps, like that's a big moment in U.S. politics. Like if you look at some of the greatest speeches that have been given probably over the last, 50, 60 years, that one that Kennedy gave, to Berlin is right up there as one of the most monumental speeches ever given by any U.S. president. So it's just really funny that it had, kind of like Ryan mentioned, it had such an impact on the people over here, and it has such an impact on American history, especially recent American history, and, the people of Russia had no idea that it ever happened.
Well, there's a lot of messages you got to send as a political figure, and sometimes it is pandering to the crowd instead of sending a message to the opponent. So, I mean, obviously, it's not like he could have just airdropped all those pamphlets with his whole speech written out onto the Russian people.
Yeah, I know
but,
that.
Or, the rest of them. Kristaps, so you mentioned that you're from Latvia, not from Russia. I guess we should clarify that.
From Latvia,
Yeah.
yes.
We mentioned that.
That was a part together with Lithuania and Estonia, which was like included in the Soviet Union directly. Same with Armenia and all those other Eastern Bloc countries.
Okay. All right. So, Josh, is that all for you?
Yeah, that I'm done.
So pretty much was not a jelly donut. He was not that.
No, that was bullshit.
Okay. So Kennedy just, was going around f***ing interns the entire time anyway. So
Yeah, pretty much.
that's it. He just did that. He's not a jelly donut. He's just an intern f***er.
He's just a whore.
Yeah, there we go. All right, so moving away from politics and general life in the USSR, we're going to get to the sciencey side of things, or even some of the more gruesome side of things on Kristaps' side. He's going to get to that, but for right now, we're going to move on to the space race, which is debatably one of the most fascinating things about the entire Cold War, because once again, it was a dick-waving contest, and one way they did it was by seeing who could get to the moon first, for all of their resources. The moon is loaded with rocks that you can build other rocks with. And what else does the moon have on it?
Sam Rockwell?
Rocks.
Cheese? Oh yeah, it has a bunch of Sam Rockwells on the moon. Okay.
Don't forget the secret Nazi base on the dark side.
Yeah. So what we're going to cover is something that's a little bit more, I guess there's a whole thing in the U.S. occasionally where they like to be a little bit self-deprecating, believe it or not, Kristaps, that there are some rumors that just show, oh, well, you've even talked to me about this before. The general idea of anywhere in like the Balkans or in the USSR, former USSR, there's a whole air of practicality, right? There's something where you can pretty much MacGyver something into something else for
When MacGyver appeared, we took notes.
Oh, there you go. Exactly. It's a resourceful thing where you can take something and use it for a different purpose that it either A, wasn't intended for, or just all of you are trained to be Boy Scouts. So, or, the Soviet youth. So that's
Pioneers, not Boy Scouts.
So
I don't think Boy Scouts are taught how to recognize enemy tanks and do sabotage from behind.
No, but we can tie like 50 different knots, fucker, okay?
We got skills.
Yeah, we got skills. We can tie those tanks into knots. All right, so going into it, what we're going to be talking about is one of these little jokes on America where it's been like, oh, Russia has been smarter with this. And it's one of those, it was seen on Facebook a lot of times, and I have a little vendetta against Facebook posting these type of things because it is one of those very believable deals where it's a nice little anecdote or just a quick little quip to say, oh, here's about being resourceful and critical thinking.
Well, I mean, it's been around. I remember hearing this long before the days of Facebook.
Right, exactly. But it's one of those things that once Facebook came along, you see it posted every few months by somebody, or every few weeks even. There's a whole lot of things you can see. So we're talking about the Russian space pens or the NASA space pens, or we'll just get into it. So the story is that when NASA was first getting into the space race in the 60s, they were trying to figure out a way to get pens to work in anti-gravity, because pens in general are based on gravity. When you're holding them upright, the ink will go down and hit the ballpoint, and then it can continue on to write. So you need that gravity aspect for it to work. And they could not figure out how to get things to be anti-gravity pens. So what they did was they invested millions of dollars into inventing a pen that could work in space. Meanwhile, Russia, over on the other side, was saying, oh, okay, we've just been using pencils for a long time. And it makes America look like a bunch of idiots saying that, oh, they did this, but they go too far with trying to come up with these solutions when really it's right in front of their nose and it's simple. Well, it's a little bit different. Kristaps, have you heard any version of that?
Yeah, it's the same thing, but really what happened there with the space and rocketry was so dreadful that, the Russian-Soviet space program started as, those were failed ICBM missiles.
Yeah, that hopefully made it to space.
They could only hit space, so, yeah. So there's, again, this joke that, Americans call their guys astronauts because they're traveling to the stars. We call our guys cosmonauts because, we can just send dissidents into fucking space.
To be fair, cosmonaut is way cooler than astronaut.
I agree.
That's such a cooler name.
I agree.
Hey, we sent
Cosmodrome.
I mean, we both sent tons of animals up there first, so...
Talking about animals, by the way.
Leica's coming back.
Check this out.
What did a chimp do to be a dissident? What did Laika do?
There was a chimp. There were also a couple of fishes.
Really? They sent fish in space? That's kind of cruel.
And you know what? The French sent the first cat in space.
Well, cats deserve
that.
it. Yeah, I would do it. I would do it immediately. I'm not a cat person. Okay, I wouldn't send one into space, but still, I have less sympathy for the cat than the dog.
I would. I'd send a kitten. I don't give a shit. I don't feel nothing.
Oh, there you go. Well, anyway, so I guess getting a little bit into the actual story of this is that, yes, during the 1960s, NASA did have a problem with getting their pens to work, so they ordered some mechanical pencils, 34 actually, from the Tycom Engineering Company for the price of $4,382.50 in 1960s money. So it's much more expensive now. I didn't do the calculations for inflation, but it was about $128.89 for a single mechanical pen.
We can say it's too much.
Mechanical pencil, actually.
I don't think we need to convert it to know that that's way too much on mechanical pencil.
Yeah, so we're going to go ahead and just start right there with, yes, NASA was using pencils at one point. So, but they were still paying a lot of money for it, but they were using pencils. That was their first option, is they actually put money into using mechanical pencils instead of using pens. So that kind of like nips that in the butt right there. But at some point, they decided they were having some issues with these pencils, and this gets into the actual logic side of things, where pencils are made back then from graphite or from lead. Doesn't matter. What they were made from it's just floating tinder inside of space. Like, when you are in a spaceship, you are in a pressurized oxygen tank, and oxygen is great for starting fires. And if you have anything that can catch a spark and potentially get caught, that spark hits like a little fractioned piece of pencil in space, then that's going to cause a fire and cause the whole thing to go up. I mean,
you gotta realize NASA spends insane amounts of money to make sure nothing is flammable.
Yeah, that's a big deal. After some of the failed Apollo missions, like Apollo 1 and such, they didn't want any more fire issues. So they were in a pinch at that point, and also they were trying to figure out why they were spending so much money on pencils alone. And the idea is that NASA spent millions of dollars on investing in these pens. Turns out that didn't even happen. It was a man named Paul C. Fisher who owned the Fisher Pen Company, and he invested $1 million into making a pen that could write upside down, underwater, in temperatures of 50 degrees Fahrenheit to 400 degrees Fahrenheit. And for you, Kristaps, that's 10 degrees Celsius to 260 degrees Celsius. Don't say I did never do anything for you. They pretty much were trying to invent like the Glock 9mm of pens. Or under any condition.
No. I give because you can pretty much take a Glock and you can shoot it underwater. You can drag it through sand like an AK-47.
Okay.
I get what he's saying.
I was very confused.
It's a very the AK-40. They were trying to get the AK-47 of pens. It could deal with anything and then still shoot.
That's for our Russian friends. The AK-47.
There we go. Because so many Latvians are going to do this with us.
Reliable, sturdy.
So the end
capitalist.
So the end result of this was that the Paul C. Fisher Company offered 7 AG-7 modeled anti-gravity pens to NASA. And these things were great. So, number one, they were nitrogen pressured, so you don't have to worry about gravity anymore. That's just like shit of the past. Nitrogen pushed in, and it served two purposes. It would, A, be able to push the actual fluid to the ballpoint of the pen so that it could write, but it also prevented mixing of air so no oxidation would happen with the ink. And once oxidation happens, the ink could go bad or it could dry up. But as an even more fail-safe, there was the beginning of gel pens. I don't remember. Do you remember in 5th grade, Josh, how all the girls were like obsessed with having all different colored gel pens?
Yeah, the girls, right?
Yeah, they're great. Okay, I had a bunch of gel pens. Fuck you. But so after we had the gel pens, these guys started. They made the gel pens, and it was a gel solid form until it hit the ballpoint and got moved. So it was just kind of like, I guess, wearing down. Like if you were to rub a piece of Jello on a paper or something like that, you would get Jello stains. It's like a slug. You get skid marks.
You wouldn't go with an eraser?
No, because eraser doesn't turn to liquid.
Yeah, but I mean, you're still trying to get the residue after, right?
Yeah, I guess so. But it goes from gel, which is kind of like a semi-solid,
anything
to
that involves
liquid.
Anything that involves the word skid marks as an example is probably not a good example, Ryan.
So if you were to take a turd and rub it on paper, no. So that's what this did. It was at 35 psi. It was a really nice pen. Was gel powered, and NASA ended up taking these. They said, "Yeah, these are great. We will use them." And it turns out that, guess what? The USSR used them too. Both of them ended up getting a 40% discount from the Fisher Pen Company for the price of $2.39 per pen in 1960s money, which was still, that's like, I don't know.
Probably $20.
That less than that.
Nah, it's probably around there. We're rounding.
Listeners, write us in and tell us how stupid we are about it. I'm going to put bets on it. I'm going to say it was about $5 a pen.
I'll say 20. Greg? Input, give us a number.
I'm looking.
Greg picks 3,000.
Greg
picks 3,000. So that's the number he's given.
Okay. So anyway, you can still buy these pens today. You can buy them for the cheap price of $50 online.
Really?
Yeah, you can get
That's
legit
cool.
space pens in case you ever get launched into space for being a dissident.
1438 in 1967. What year did y'all say? I just did 67.
Yeah,
That's close
that's
enough.
fine. So
Are we going Price is Right rules, or because I'm technically closer, but you're right if we're going Price is Right rules?
We're going Price is Right rules.
Oh, how convenient,
Price is wrong, bitch.
boy.
So pretty much what we have is that, yes, this happened. We did have these space pens that were pretty expensive, but A, NASA did not invest in them. It was a private company that eventually sold to them. B, Russia ended up using the pens too. And also C, we used pencils at one point. So it's one of the things where they will make a story a lot simpler just to have it digest or to make it an anecdote. And that pisses me off because it's it's kind of just, I'm not a giant patriot, but it's unnecessary America bashing. You could bash America for a myriad of different things, but that's not one of them because it was actually a safety concern. And instead of putting people in a tin can, just shooting up in space and then giving them tons of flammables to possibly just blow up that tin can, they put a lot of money into making sure their people wouldn't die. They weren't expendable. And on that note, we are going to go to Kristaps' next subject. You ready for this one, Kristaps?
Speaking
I'm
of
excited.
flammable and people dying,
Yeah.
Actually no people who died in my story for once.
All right, so topping off the episode, Kristaps, what do you have?
Well, I did a space race story myself on the eastern border.
Very good
And,
episode. Chilling episode.
yeah.
It's a crazy episode, yeah, one of the more depressing ones. But I found out an interesting thing that I want to tell you, which didn't end up on the episode because I found out about it only later.
Really?
Yeah, I just really researched for this episode, and I just found this report, which I want to talk about. And this is not about Lost Cosmonauts and everything, because Lost Cosmonauts is bullshit. But
For anybody unaware, the Lost Cosmonauts is the idea that the Russians had a bunch of cosmonauts that much more than they had said that ended up dying either in space, on launch, on return, and they were just kind of wiped from history and airbrushed out of everything.
See, the biggest problem with that is that Gagarin was specifically chosen to be the first one in space because of he was ethnically Russian, which was very important. He came from proletariat. His mom and dad were farmers in the kolkhoz, and all of these factors were really important. And he had the perfect height and everything because he had to be short because the Vostok 2, the spaceship was kind of crappy and cramped.
Well, that's what malnutrition does.
Well, now, but we're not going to talk about we're not going to talk about how Gagarin flew to space because I mentioned that a lot in my own episode. We're going to talk about what happened when he landed.
Okay.
Because, see, we're imagine this. We are now in the year 1961, on the 12th of April. And imagine that you're just living in these Uzmorye or Smelkova, those two tiny villages who are just going to their work in kolkhoz. They know that, sort of the first man in space has just flown around somewhere, but, they're just working in the kolkhoz under the name of Shevchenko.
What part of Russia is this, roughly? Like, if you were just...
I'll get to this. That's... Basically, everyone was thinking that this might fail, all this first flight in space. So the Russian news agency TASS basically had sent like before the start of the spaceship like 3 letters with the text. One was the text that yay, we fly in space successfully. The other one was please foreign governments help us find Gagarin if he's landed in your territory. And the third one was that Gagarin was dead. So they didn't actually know if this would work. Well, nothing really happened that much, and Gagarin successfully flew. But his slowing down system failed. Therefore, Gagarin landed not even close to the Baikonur Cosmodrome, which is deep Kazakhstan. Okay, but he landed 3,000 kilometers to the west in the Saratov Oblast. Not so far to the city of Engels.
Okay,
yeah.
And if you want to be completely exact, so he landed in essentially a wheat field between these Smelkov and Uzmortye villages.
In Kazakhstan?
No, it's 3,000 kilometers to the west in Saratov. It's kind of mid-Russia.
Sorry, I'm American. I don't know maps, so thank you for clarifying.
Maps are not that important.
Okay.
First of all, he landed there, and now the crazy parts happen because these guys were completely unready for this. Because on 10:55, when Gagarin was already gathering his parachutes from his landing, the radio just said, "Cosmonaut over Africa is turning on his brakes," because there was a 40-minute lag of the reporting of this event here, because obviously they waited until he left orbit to actually report.
Oh.
I gotcha.
So see, the official version is that that Soviets did and kind of promoted without any evidence. They specifically hid the evidence that technically official version that the Soviets kind of promulgate is that the Gagarin landed in his Vostok ship. That wasn't the case. They were really rushing this just to get past the United States. So Vostok essentially was a system where Gagarin had to catapult himself out of Vostok.
Oh wow!
And this was a kind of a secret of the state until like 1981 or something.
Really?
Because the Central Committee was afraid that because he returned in this way through catapulting himself from Vostok, that they wouldn't actually count it as a flight in space for some reason.
What?
Yeah.
Okay.
Now, basically, these guys are just going to their kolkhoz and working in the field, and they know that Gagarin is up there in space. They heard it on their radios, But what they're saying is that 4 gigantic parachutes open over their villages. 2 of them, the main and the reserve ones, gathered Gagarin with his like catapulting kind of thing. Other one carried a heated up metal ball, which is like the Vostok itself, and the third one was the carryable emergency supplies, which consisted of a walkie-talkie, inflatable boat, a lot of food stuff, warm clothing, and a Makarov pistol.
That sounds like all you need in any situation.
Okay, yeah.
It was basically meant so what if he kind of lands somewhere in the middle of nowhere so that he could survive for a while and shoot off bears.
Yeah, lands in Beartopia and just has to go buck wild on them.
Now, this is where the story gets really Soviet. Okay. Everyone looks at this.
Okay.
It wasn't Soviet enough already?
Yeah. What would you call that
this
before?
Gets more Soviet. First off, it wasn't even like, even a year hadn't passed from the U-2 incident where the spy powers kind of landed. And he was kind of grabbed by the local kolkhoz people as well, not by KGB guys at first. And they got extra money and some goods. So what did these guys do? Basically everyone around, all the farmers, grabbed their crowbars and their pitchforks and they just charge it. They charge the field. And all the school teachers and everyone, they just go there as well and mess it with like whatever they have. And it's reported that, and they just come there and like, and they just see these parachutes landing, and already there are thoughts going around in the territory that, hey, you know, parachutes are made from silk. Parachute silk could be made into very nice bags, and like stuff could be made from them. So they rush, charge Gagarin, they don't know it's Gagarin, and want to get the parachute silk. First one who made it there, who kind of happened to just charge it, was I don't know, how's the guy who like sits and guards like the forest, the ranger, forest?
Yeah, ranger, forest ranger. Yeah,
park ranger, something like that. Yeah.
It's not park ranger. It's like a guy who sits in the cabin in the forest and looks over what's going on there and oversees hunts and shit like that.
Oh, we call him a hermit over here.
No,
it's not a hermit.
A ranger. You're right. It's a ranger.
Guardian of the forest guy, like officially looking over so that no one will be poaching and shit. Like I suppose something like a park ranger. I don't know the exact term.
Okay.
Anyway, local park ranger's wife Anna Takhtarova and her granddaughter Rita Takhtarova. These were the first 2 who noticed this and ran there. And you know, Gagarin was flying in a bright orange outfit there. And they were really, really scared because they hadn't seen anyone in a fucking spacesuit before, and it was bright orange. So Gagarin comes out of his parachute kind of thing and starts yelling in Russian, "Where are you gonna run? Don't run away! Don't do this!" Because they're really afraid because they're just nearby, and he just yells, and this is direct quote: "Come on, where are you gonna run? I'm on my own. I'm Soviet. Don't worry, come here." And they hear that he's talking Russian, but he could still be a spy. But they come kind of closer. This granny with her granddaughter, and they saw these red letters SSSR CCCP on his helmet. Now the thing about this CCCP thing, it happened on the last moment, because that was kind of the second one, the second shoot, and the Russian didn't really figure out the fact that they need some sort of symbol on there for recognition. So they actually got and painted that shit with a special paint by an artist, those letters, just before the flight even started, and I mentioned this on my episode.
Oh, wow.
And there is not, the name who said this is not documented, but there's direct quote which basically states that, well, you know, Yura will just, you know, land somewhere on the field, and while he will just pull out his kind of card that shows that he's our cosmonaut, some guy with a kolkhoz will just punch him or stab him with a pitchfork and stuff. And you know, and so they wrote, that was the direct quote where they painted these letters on, and it actually worked, just like that.
That's a real go-getter attitude, though. You got to give it to him. Like, they see somebody coming from the sky and just like, all right, you ready? Let's go fuck him up and take his parachute and make bags out of it. Like, that
parachute.
Like,
sounds very capitalist.
Basically, as soon as he manages to kind of talk the situation through But to these two women, all the Kolkhoz guys just run with all their crowbars and everything, and he has to explain again. I'm the Soviet man. I just came from space, and I'm like my own guy. And people kind of start looking at him. Also, army people from like rocket division kind of side also arrives, and he again needs to explain himself because everyone thinks he's still in space.
He had a gun. Why did he have to explain himself to anybody? And that's also impressive. There are the people running with crowbars than a man with a gun who was prepared to kill bears.
And now it gets even more Soviet.
Yeah, that's great. I love this story. It's awesome. It's
not even over yet, man.
Oh no.
Anyhow, the guys, the military from the secret rocket base in their car just grabbed Gagarin because, he's about to be pitchforked and nobody believes him. They just grab Gagarin and then take him to be, taken away to those authorities.
He's a space Frankenstein.
But Mr. Gagarin manages to yell at the guys, like all these villagers, I'll be kind of back, but you guard the parachutes.
Oh, God.
Oh, no.
Now, what happens? These guys go away, but the people stay there. And they kind of look at that, there's this Vostok ship that has crashed, there's this gigantic bowl. So what do? They go and brutally just go there, and the local mechanic from the Kolkhoz was the first one who just came there. And he goes in the bowl, still hot, but he pokes it with his crowbar and it doesn't explode. So what happens? They kind of stop and they see, that there's food there. There's quality survival food. There's canned meat, everything. It's full survivor gear with meat and all the best food the Soviet army can provide. That you're supposed to survive a month on this. So what happens is they just start giving out this food to everyone. They just basically steal all the parachutes. And then they kind of figure out, food is great and everything, all of this is cool, but hey, that's some good metal there. So they use their crowbars to essentially disassemble all of this shit to grab all the screws and nice metal, because that was also a deficit.
See, over here, it wouldn't have been distributed.
No.
I think there was a Twilight Zone episode about something like that. Actually, it was the Pearl, too. That's in Mexico, too. That was a good story.
Basically they dismantle all of this shit and distributes everything. And they just crack down on everything, and when the military comes back, there's only this carcass remaining, and that's being kind of sawed with a blowtorch to take it to a point where you kind of give like old metal for some cash.
And that's why you don't have too many artifacts in your history museum.
Wait,
it's all been repurposed.
There's more.
Oh shit! Really?
Jesus Christ!
Yes. So basically, the Colonel and everyone who kind of wanted to study the capsule, they're kind of really, really, really angry. But they kind of are late to this because everyone's proud because of Gagarin. Now, but the army arrives, KGB arrives and starts to look at this because it's basically theft. But all the parachutes have been split equally, and after this, the school children, everyone just walking around with parachutes sewn bags. And they were the walkie-talkie had been found, because owning a walkie-talkie for a Soviet citizen now, that was kind of a serious crime. And they also found the boat, because the guy who had stolen the inflatable boat, he was kind of rushing there and he wanted to inflate it apparently, but it also had this capsule, a flare, which was basically gigantic orange paint grenade, which kind of splattered him orange. So they found the boat and they found the walkie-talkie. But everyone's angry for dismantling this shit. But Gagarin, in person, asked to not punish anyone. So these guys got scot-free with this, because Gagarin personally asked the big guys up to not punish those guys.
It's my big space gift. I survived. Don't worry about it.
Yeah, but after that, Yuri Gagarin had promised that he would come back. So 4 years later, he actually comes back, and that's their national story from their newspaper. In 1965, in January, he brings them sausage and oranges, which is amazing. And he just sits there and talks with these people. And his final speech with these guys is anyone wants something? And it's kind of famous, and that sits in the museum now, because apparently one of these villagers had risen up and said, I want to be able to purchase a car, because you had to wait in line for 20 years or 10 years to get one. And you know what? That Volga is still there in that city. He actually got the permission to buy a car.
Really?
And they still, and that Sverdlovsk and Uzmoy, those villages, they still have like the screws from the original Vostok that ship in museum in glass jars. And once a year, like Putin people go there and visit this stuff, and journalists visit that shit too. And the source of this is by a researcher and a journalist Vlad Strogov. From like this year's published. This guy did investigative journalism and gathered a bunch of tales from the people who lived there. And like right now, since Glasnost, this was open information and it was published because it's like this is the most Soviet study that I can tell you people about. What happens? Capitalist pigs are landing here.
No, that is a very nicely wrapped story of just like the ideals, the government, and the morals of the Soviet people and how much they will technically abide to the rules. Because, yes, they broke the law by stealing, but they also made sure to distribute it to everybody once they actually got the ship.
And like I said to you guys before, when I wanted to explain to these guys what the story's about, I can't really put it in simple terms. And yeah, we have to wrap up, but man.
No. Take your time.
So yeah, that's about it. This is the crazy story of Gagarin's landing and two very happy villages who got food for a while.
Well, one thing that I do want to say to all of our listeners, that if you want to know more about just the space race aspect during the Cold War, I believe it's episode 12 of the Eastern Border. Is that correct, Kristaps?
Yeah.
I will have it in the show notes, but it's probably one of the best podcast episodes you'll hear from any history podcast. It's absolutely amazing.
It's fantastic.
I mean, you have a lot of great sources on there. You have some really great like supplemental like audio and other material that you implement into it.
Just make sure you're not having a bad day beforehand.
Yeah.
It's pretty.
It's heavy. It's a little heavy.
Yeah.
But it's so like just fascinating. I mean, history is fascinating, whether it's good, bad, death, happiness, whatever. History, I'm sure, at least to me, is very fascinating, and I really enjoyed that episode. And I feel like if you like this episode and you like a lot of the stuff that we covered and you want more of it, that is the number one place I'm going to point to for our listeners to go check out, and just all of the Eastern Border in general, because it's a really fascinating insight into everything that you cover, and it's great.
Exactly. So thank you, Kristaps. It has been awesome having you on as our first official guest for the season.
Yeah, man, we're excited.
It's been great, and especially having another, Dark Lord, one of the Dark Mythers, especially one of the founding ones for that matter. And how can people reach you? How can people, send you either love mail or hate mail? We'll only give you love mail.
theeasternborder@gmail.com.
Okay.
Or you can follow me on Twitter @Eastern_border, or you can find the Eastern Border on Facebook. I don't have a set, or you can just do the same for Lesser Bonapartes and check out that show as well. You can contact me through Dark Myths, and if you hate mail me, just send them to whatever you guys do.
Send them to Greg.
My New Orleans friends shall deliver the hate mail. Yes.
Oh,
they
yeah.
will also be very happy to do so.
I just remembered that very pointed introduction that Glenn did for us, so we'll have to get you back. We'll come up with something nice for that one right there. Don't you worry, Kristaps. You're gonna get your own.
I would love to see you on my show as well, or hear you on my show as well at some point, of course.
Hey, we ain't got to do, so have us on.
That sounds awesome, dude.
So in the meantime, I guess you can reach us at what? Greg, that's you.
Rumorfliespodcast.com, rumorflies@gmail.com, @rumorflies on Twitter and Instagram, facebook.com/rumorflies. You can do Google+, you'll find us there because that's sweet SEO. And you will find us on basically every podcast platform, Stitcher, Podcast Addict, iTunes.
Google Play Podcasts. And
I'm going to start trailing off.
That sounds great, Greg.
Vocal fry. So anyway, that's about it for us. And actually, we remembered the song that we're going to be playing tonight. It is Arcs of Command by Caspian. It's a little bit long, but we love these guys with a passion.
Yeah,
they're
awesome
really
dudes.
good friends to us. Like we've met them and everything. They're awesome people, and it's a little bit different than we played before. Yeah, no, we're not going to talk about that, Greg.
Nope.
Just check it out. It's worth a listen. Once again, thank you, Kristaps. And we'll let you see.
Thanks, man, as always.
Just, Kristaps, it's going to be a race between you and Greg to do the outro. All right, so thank you for listening to Rumor Flies. I'm Ryan.
I'm Josh.
I'm Greg.
in your Kristaps.
Happiness is mandatory.
Threw it for a loop. All right, thanks everybody. Bye.
Bah.